welcome back to the show. The New York Foundling helps children, youth, and adults and families in need through services, supports, and advocacy, strengthening family and community, and helping each individual reach their full potential. They provide carefully designed programs, effective and interrelated services, as well as opportunities for children, families, and adults to create transformational change in their own lives. Joining me to share a little bit more on this, I'm pleased to be joined by the president of New York Foundling, Bill Baccaglini. And Bill, good to have you.
Hey, Daren, thanks for having me back. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Hey, as always. And when we talk amidst these challenging times, you know, you really are doing a great job in terms of trying to provide services. So for people who aren't familiar with New York Foundling, let's first give them a little bit of an overview.
Okay, we're about 151 years old at this point. Started by the Sisters of Charity in 1869, and we've grown to be about a $220 million agency, approximately 3,000 staff. We provide child welfare services, juvenile justice services, services for the developmentally disabled. We're in every borough in the city, the surrounding counties, and we provide Head Start services to 1,500 families in Puerto Rico.
Wow, pretty amazing work. You know, pretty busy job. Talk to us about some of the things that you really do. I want to get first to, you know, youth in the juvenile justice system. We see that number continue to increase. And as those numbers continue to increase, of course, the need for more services. A little bit more about the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I would say this to you, Daren. We firmly believe, and maybe it's owing to where I came from. I was in public policy in Albany for many years, first at the New York State Division for Youth and then at the Office of Children and Family Services. We actually believe in New York State that we've overvalued residential care and incarceration. And we think very little good long-term comes out of long incarcerative stays. So we believe that offenders, young people who have committed whatever act they've committed, we believe they're best served, as long as they're safe and the community is safe, we believe they're best served in the context of family, in the context of community. And so that's what we do. We're not big, you know, if someone came to me and said, Bill, I'll give you $1 million to open up a detention center, I wouldn't do it. We're not big believers in incarceration. We're big believers in personal responsibility. We're big believers in accountability, but we think there's smarter ways to do it. And so we have an evidence-based intervention that can actually be administered with young people right in the context of the community. And, you know, the rearrest rates are very, very low. The judges are very enamored of the program. It's actually called Families Rising, and it works to get young people off of Rikers Island. And so that's our major justice program at that point. We're very happy going down that road. Leave residential care, leave detention centers to others who believe in it and do it better than we would. We're big believers in keeping folks in the community, because here's why, Daren. At the end of the day, if you remove a young person, 16 and 17 years old, for the majority of crimes, now we're taking, you know, we're not talking mass murders, the typical felony, for example, you take them and you put them in an incarcerative environment for 6 months, a year, 18 months, it's an open question of whether you're going to be able to get them back into the community. And so we would argue it's best not even to sever those community ties and work with them right within the community while keeping the public safe and keeping them, you know, responsible for their behavior and accountable. I'm not talking about, oh, you know, go do whatever you want to do. That's not what we're about. We have strict program rules, and when you violate the program rules, there are consequences. We go back to court and say to the judge, hey, judge, Johnny didn't do exactly what he was told, so we're not so sure he's going to be successful. So there's accountability built in. But for the vast majority of these young people, the community is where accountability needs to be adhered to, I think.
Yeah. And you talk about young people, let's talk about families for a minute, because in addition to working with those who are incarcerated or potentially incarcerated, you do a great job with families. And I know one of the programs you have is Families Rising.
Families Rising. Yeah, no, Families Rising is a program we started, a few years ago with the help of a retired Supreme Court judge, a famous judge in New York City, Michael Corriero, who started to do some work at the Foundling, liked the interventions we had. And he said, let me take this to my colleagues, my former colleagues on the bench. I think they'd love it. And so we work with judges, we work with corporation counsel, we work with defense attorneys to actually examine the young folks who are on Rikers Island and say, listen, this probably isn't the best place for them or for the community long-term. We think we can work with these folks in the community. So the judges have bought in. We had have a waiting list. Well, pre-pandemic, we had a waiting list for the program. And what it is that the judges, these youngsters are already convicted, right? So they've already been found guilty or have pled guilty to a felony. And what the offer is this, what judges will offer them, okay, listen, Johnny, we're going to let you participate in this program. And if you successfully complete this program, in exchange, we will seal your record and you'll have youthful offender status. And the program has been a tremendous success. The rearrest rates out of it are a quarter the rearrest rates for young people returning from correctional facilities. So we're ecstatic about Families Rise, and we believe it's fundamentally a game changer for these young people.
When we talk about young people, obviously, we know that they have a lot of challenges and a need for a lot of services. And so as we talk about this, mentoring is also a huge, important thing. Talk to us about mentorship, because I know that's something that you do at New York Foundling, the idea of mentorship, bringing people forward and helping people to be able to pay it forward.
Yeah, we actually think, Daren, we think mentoring that's well done, not willy-nilly, oh, here's a mentor, just mentors who are well-trained, who understand the kids, who understand the community context in which these young people live with, I don't want to say a menu, but with some training, we find that they're life coaches to these kids. If the Foundling does the appropriate matches, we find that these things sustain themselves going forward for years. Now think about it. There are many of the young people that we talk about, whether it's the kids in foster care, aging out of care, or the young people we're trying to get off of Rikers Island, their ties to their own families are strained, right? Some of them don't even have ties any longer to their families. So the idea that we can provide them with an adult who understands the context in which they live, we find that it pays incredible dividends to coach them through. Think about the age these kids are at, 17 to 22. When you and I were 17 and 22, we were making critical decisions that would be with us for the rest of our life. These kids are being asked to make these decisions without any supports. It's silly. And so we provide them with mentors/coaches. We're part of a program. I'm sure you've heard about it, Daren. If not, you should get our youth advisory board on your show, Erica Francois, who heads up a former foster care youth, who heads up our advisory board. It's a program called Fair Futures. And what it does is it assigns a coach and a tutor to all kids in foster care from middle school onward. And our hope is that these coaches will be able to fund these coaches until these young people reach 26. That's what these young people need. So I highly recommend that you get Erica on to talk more in depth about Fair Futures, because it too is a fundamental game changer for these young people.
So when you look at mentorship, right, I think a lot of people say there's value in it. There's some people who really don't understand it. For you, what is the sticking point in mentorship that you would like to convey to somebody else who may think about even possibly being a mentor?
Oh boy, it's being able to, it's one, understanding young people, appreciating what young people can contribute, appreciating the decisions these young people are soon going to have to make. It's not rocket science, Daren. So I am certain 80% of your viewers, 80, 90% of your viewers could be good mentors. It's having that shoulder to lean on. It's having that open mind, that soft ear to hear what these kids have been through, some of the struggles they've been through, and it's directing them. Again, it's accountable. No, Johnny, you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should do this. It's kids. Listen, kids are looking for direction and support, but they want unconditional love. They want unconditional friendship. They don't want every relationship conditioned upon them doing X will do Y. That's not how you grew up. That's not how I grew up. That's not what these kids want. So, and I'm sure the vast majority of your listeners, it requires no specialized training. It requires a big heart and an open mind. And most folks can be very, very good mentors.
I know you're filling a gap in one other area that I want to talk about, and that is that of mental health. Because when we talk about COVID-19, what we have seen further exacerbated throughout the course of time is the need for mental health services. How are you approaching mental health within the organization?
Oh, Daren, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I'm nervous about what we're going to find coming out of COVID once the clouds lift. As you know, we operate a charter school in the South Bronx on Brown Place for young people in the child welfare work, kids who are in foster care whose families are receiving preventive services. And we've been operating all year, and God, some of the stories, oh, Daren, the mental health challenges, you just can't take a 9-year-old and say, we're going to freeze you for 14 or 15 months. Then we're just going to pick up where we left off. It doesn't work. So I believe that mental health services coming out of this will be the biggest need that we see, that and educational regression, learning loss. Those two things will be the things that drive the Foundling over the next year or two. Now I'll say this to you, how are we organizing? Gone, Daren, I'm not so sure it should have ever been appropriate, but gone are the days where we want the families to come to our clinic. Come to our clinic, Mrs. Smith, and bring your children with you. No. The problem with clinics, Daren, is clinics are context free. We see a young person in a clinic and we don't really understand the social milieu in which they live or that the family lives. Right. So we actually believe mental health services need to be brought to the community and provided by people who understand the community. So that's what we're doing. Our services are all home-based, clinically focused, but I tell you, I am nervous. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, we'll have no problem handling the needs emerging from COVID. I'm not so sure. We're going to do our best. We think we have an idea on the scale, but it's still an open question. So there's good reason for you and for me, for Latricia, for the Bronx community to be nervous about what we're going to find once the clouds lift.
I mean, let's be honest. What we're talking about here is the potential for possibly a lot of PTSD, and PTSD from people who've never had it before. This has become traumatic. And when you look at people who've got COVID fatigue, may have lost their job, may have lost their loved one, you may have someone that has not had any challenges, all of a sudden now having challenges and, dealing with this now.
Oh, no, and that's exactly right. And you know what? Anybody who comes on your show and tells you that they've got this figured out, they're not telling you the truth. Our ears are to the ground. Our eyes are wide open, and we think our charter school gives us some insights into what we're going to see in the larger community once the cloud lifts. But this is going to be very, very complicated, and I would urge all of those in this sector, in this work, move your services to the community. Context, while it's always been important, is going to be even more critical this time around. And then learning loss and education. Think about this. Daren, let me give you this number. 50% of the young people in foster care in 9th grade repeat 9th grade. Repeat, 50%. Right. Now, think about next year, because the city is going to have to socially promote kids because they need the space. You just can't freeze and let 8th graders be 8th graders again, because they got to bring the 7th graders up to be 8th graders. So if you have 50% of 9th graders in a normal year repeating 9th grade, if you're in foster care, think about what's going to happen next year. Right. The learning loss and education regression is going to be unbelievable. So what the Foundling's done is we put $1.5 million of our own money with the same amount from the Hilton Foundation, and we are tutoring every ninth grader in foster care across the entire city, regardless of what agency they're in, because we know what's going to happen if we can't keep these kids academically current. They're going to drop out of school, and and guess what? It's the Black and brown kids from the Black and brown communities where this is going to be the most pronounced, and we just can't have that. We just can't have it.
I mean, that's why I love talking to you, Bill, because it's you have your finger on the pulse. And I mean, I don't mean that like, I mean that real seriously, that you have your finger on the pulse and it's not, you're just talking it, but really you understand it and you get it. I want to ask you, when was the aha moment to say, listen, we need to contextually pivot and take ourselves from being this agency that's like, we wait for you to come to us now coming to you? Because some of the stuff that you're talking about doing, you were doing pre-COVID.
Yes, yes. The aha moment for me, and it goes back to how you and I started a few minutes ago, this conversation, that I've never been a big fan of congregate care settings. I think because you've broken ties with the community. So we've always been very, very community focused. Then 10, 12 years ago, after reviewing a lot of programs that were used across the country, these evidence-based models so that they had done clinical trials on, as it turns out, they were all family and community-based. We married the ideology with the interventions, and I think we've actually moved the system. Now ACS, most of its preventive services are evidence-based and more focused on the community. They're going more into primary prevention. We think it's critical. We think it's important. The community, listen, kids' issues are the product of relationships, some good, some bad, but they're the product of relationships. And for us to analyze kids in isolation from those relationships is silly and short-sighted.
Talk to us about how the organization carries out funding and being able to do what you do.
Well, funding's going to get even more complicated now. Again, with the federal stimulus and the state budget, we'll wait to see what the city budget looks like in July. But we think that the finger's in the dam for the next year. We were very nervous, but the federal stimulus came in, and now there's a finger in the dam. But think about it. Agencies like the Foundling, Graham Windham, Children's Aid Society, you name it, Acacia, which is very big up in the Bronx, we all lost 15 months of fundraising. You know, we can have virtual galas and all. It's not the same. I can't go meet with donors. I can't bring donors to programs and say, hey, listen, look at this, talk to these young. It's much harder to do. So we have to catch up in fundraising because, as you know, government doesn't pay the full bill. On a $220 million budget, the Foundling loses about $7 or $8 million a year. We have to go out and raise that money. And now we've lost a little time. We're fortunate. We have a little money in the bank, so we're not going to stop serving, but I got to play catch up. So as soon as the clouds do lift, I got to be in those restaurants at night. I got to be in people's homes, and I got to be pushing these issues. And, you know, at the end of the day, Daren, I'd like you to be involved with the Foundling, but be involved with something. If it's not the Foundling, if it's Graham Windham, if it's Acacia, be involved with something. Give back. Give back. Look out. Don't always look inside you. Look outside your house. The greater good to the community. We are in this together. We are in this together. I mean, I know it's a trite saying, but it is true. It is true.
It is. And listen, you know, we all have been blessed and we have an opportunity to pay it forward. And so where we can pay it forward, certainly we need to pay it forward. So I'm gonna tell you this on TV. Whatever you need, give a holler. I'll be glad to support, to help you out with the Foundling. A great organization, you're a great guy, and we definitely want to do that. All right?
Daren, thanks. You and your family, Trish, you and your family, everybody stay well. Thanks for having me on.